I'm going to stretch my ITB because it's tight. Now I hear this so much, people saying they're stretching their ITB is tight, someone needs to release their ITB and this type of thing. And the ITB is the iliotibial band, which basically is a connective tissue band that runs down the side of your thigh. And a lot of people foam roll this area and say they're foam rolling their ITB. Obviously foam rolling works on the stretch reflex of muscle and the ITB isn't muscle, so there's a bit of a dilemma there. So are people actually stretching and trying to loosen their ITB? Are they actually achieving this? Is this possible? Is this something which is more what's happening to the quad underneath their ITB as opposed to the ITB itself? That's what we're going to discuss in today's article, is does stretching the ITB actually loosen the ITB and make it more supple? Now we know from previous research that the ITB is very difficult to lengthen out. They found, I think in a cadaver study, that it was 925 kilograms of load was required to lengthen it by 1%. And you're not going to achieve that in doing a stretch against the door, against the wall or whatever. It's just not going to really cut it. But can it be made more supple? So like pliability, give within the tissue, even if it's not actually longer. So here there was a study looking at the ITB's elasticity, and they were looking to see if actually stretching it changed the elasticity or not. So in this study they looked at ITB syndrome, and they were looking to see if there was excessive tension that caused this type of problem, also exacerbated by weakness in the hip abductors like glute medius and the hip external rotators. And they were looking at the influence of physiotherapy on ITB stiffness. So they had 14 recreational runners with ITB syndrome and 14 healthy controls. They used ultrasound shear wave elastography to measure the tension in the actual ITB. They measured muscle strength of the hips. They used the visual analog scale for pain. And they looked at subjective lower limb extremity function. So what did they find? So they found no statistical difference between legs with the stiffness of the ITB, and this was across both groups as well, whether they had ITB friction syndrome or not. However, they did see strength deficits in the hip abductor muscles and external rotator muscles in the ITB syndrome group. And they also found weakness in the hip adductors and internal rotators. So realistically, weakness very much around the hip itself. So following the 6 weeks of physiotherapy, they improved their muscle strength around the hip, weirdly except for hip abduction, but all other muscles were stronger, and pain and lower limb function was significantly improved. But what about the tension in the ITB? What did they find with that? So they found the ITB actually got stiffer, basically. Physiotherapy made the ITB stiffer. Now this doesn't mean bad. This is where the misconception comes. Stiffness of the ITB is the problem. Well, we already spoke before they did the physio, they had equal levels of stiffness in the ITB out of the painful and the pain-free groups, and therefore this is not a variable. The reason it's probably got more tension may well be related to what it attaches to. So if you're increasing the strength and the activity of your glutes through your exercise regime, you're going to tauten through that band. But remember, the whole point of this fascial component of the ITB is to transmit force. If it was really stretchy, it wouldn't do a very good job at it. So actually its job is to take tension from the glute to exert it down towards the knee, and therefore that's its role. So this shows you that the stiffness in the ITB, as in real stiffness of the ITB, has no bearing on ITB syndrome, has no bearing in terms of getting stiffer or tighter. And what you're actually probably feeling isn't even the ITB. As I mentioned previously, it's quite likely your lateral quad is basically in tension, in spasm, and being overworked, overloaded, maybe through weakness there. And when you do a foam roll or you do a stretch or whatever, you're probably releasing that area. And if someone's doing any hands-on techniques, they're probably relaxing that muscle as opposed to changing the ITB itself. And certainly when you do stretching and physio and loading, you're actually going to make it tighter in the ITB, but that doesn't mean feeling worse, because we saw here they felt better with pain, improved with function. So it does work, physio does work, but it isn't about the tension held within the actual structure of the ITB, and it isn't necessarily that you're feeling if you think that is the case. based on what we know and based on research like this. So overall, that's it for this study, and I'll see you next time.